Our guest today is the distinguished Dr. John J. Hogan. I've read his curriculum vitae, and he is to be admired. Welcome to the show, Dr. Hogan.
Good afternoon, and nice to be here, Dr. Joyce.
Thank you. I am very interested in hearing what you have to say because I've worked in the hospitality industry about 20 years ago, and I'm sure that it's changed a lot. The tourism and hospitality fields are said to be part of the world's largest industry. What kinds of training or degrees are needed for success in the hospitality field today?
The hospitality field is very diverse in its offerings, in its personality, and yet there's a certain sameness that ends up being with it because there are so many large brands. The best thing people can do in any kind of training is to focus on one or two areas that are of interest to them, and then continue, after they master that, move to something else. You can do it with online, you can do it with hospitality courses at dozens of very good schools across the country, and you can do it through certifications and certificate programs. There's lots of good options out there, but you need to focus on one or two things.
So you need to focus on something and learn it well, become an expert on it, and then move on to the next thing. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay.
As the world continues to grow in population, and as the world continues to shrink in terms of access of information and the ability to move and the ability to travel, there's so many options available. You need to become something that you're very proficient in, master it, and then you move to the next step.
What do all those initials after your name stand for? I've seen a lot of initials after your name.
What I just said a moment ago about learning, trying to specialize in something, and then moving on, I have practiced that as well. Every 4 to 5 years or so, I continue to advance to get an additional degree. So I had my undergraduate degree in hotel, restaurant, and travel administration, and then over the years I picked up industry certifications in operations, in training, formally as an educator, and then I also received 2 terminal degrees, one is an MBA and one in international business. You have to continue to grow, otherwise you get stale, and then you're not as nearly as effective as you can be.
I'm a senior, and I grow and grow and grow, one certification after another. For listeners who may not be familiar with your background, what experiences have you had in the hospitality industry to this date?
Well, I started in this industry back when I was 15 years old, and I started in an individual, family-owned business in a small town in Vermont, and I still continue to be friends with what is now the 3rd generation of that particular family business, and I learned the notion of hosting, of what hospitality was really all about. In my career, I sort of had 3 major chapters. I spent about 12 years in traditional hospitality management, hotel management, with a number of the major brands. I spent 12 years with my own consulting training company where I did a great deal of everything from asset management to giving speeches and training seminars and whatnot. And then I spent 8 years as the equivalent of the chief learning officer and chief diversity officer for a very large international hotel brand. On top of all that, I taught college for 20 years as an adjunct professor. And so I literally chose each time to move to something else because I want to keep myself interesting, and I want to keep myself interested in things. And so you find you have to move to something else. The old saying, if you always do the same thing, you're always going to get the same results. I've learned I have to evolve and grow. And it's generally a lot of fun, and at times it's challenging, but it's definitely more interesting, and long term it's a lot more successful.
You certainly have had a lot of learning experiences. That's wonderful. One of your recent roles as a corporate educated included work in the area of cultural diversity. What did that involve?
Well, I mentioned a few moments ago about how the world is getting smaller in terms of ability to grow and the ability to exchange information and become aware. It used to be in the hotel or hospitality industry that it was, like every industry, it tended to be the ones who initially founded it tended to be the ones that kind of continued it. Well, in the hospitality world, you can be of any generation, you can be of any nationality, you can be of any preference of lifestyle or anything else. And so cultural diversity when I was with that very large international corporate role, they had literally hotels in 80-some different countries, and so we tried to capitalize and concentrate on exposing and sharing the best of, whether it was from Greece or Canada or Colorado. There's all different kinds of pieces that go within things. The other major thing within cultural diversity, it's not necessarily by race, which is what diversity in the United States used to be sort of interpreted as. It's a whole lot more of mindset and appreciating and welcoming all the diversity. In the hospitality industry, in particular in the West now, people from the country of India emigrated to the West over the last generation or so and became a very major force in owning and operating properties. And so there was a whole wonderful transition from including Eastern philosophies and business practices and family operations and all of that into what had been the traditional Western hotel world. And at times there were bumps in the road, but it's a very fun, exciting thing when you do embrace all of those differences and those advantages all the way.
I definitely think the definition you gave of cultural diversity is a great one, because I do think people think diversity is race or something like that, but it is so much more. The mindset thing is really something that people need to become aware of, and I think that you are doing a great service by making them aware of that. What kinds of activities or assignments are you working on in 2010? I'm almost afraid to ask with all the things that you already do.
Well, as I mentioned before, I had sort of those three major chapters, and I'm moving to the next chapter. If you continue doing things just because it's comfortable or just because it's a paycheck or just because it's something you know, then the danger of becoming complacent, the danger of becoming obsolete is very real. And so I am working on a variety of different things. Some are continuing some activities, but in different directions. For example, I'm going to continue doing my speaking, my keynotes, and my training at different associations and whatnot, but I'm offering new and different topics this year. I'm going to continue to be a resource for hotels and legal people, or legal offices, I should say. I continue to do some expert witness work. And if you invite me back in about a month from now, I will tell you about a brand new venture that I have with a consortium of about 12 other companies that we are going to be offering a tremendous new service for hospitality. And I can't quite tell you what it is yet because we are still in the final setup and final negotiations with people. So,
well, without reservation, I certainly will have you back in a month or so. I would think, and I don't know if I'd be wrong, but I would think that this is a great career path with the economy the way that it is in hospitality. What kinds of career paths are available in the next 10 years of hospitality, and can you prove me wrong?
No, it's definitely going to continue to be a growth area. And the level of compensation depends to some degree on what we talked about earlier in relation to what you specialize in. There will always be entry-level, line-level hourly jobs that pay $10, $12, $15 an hour. And while that is an adequate starting point for some people, it's not typically a career choice because it is doing a repetitive job over and over again. Career path, I would say there's probably three main areas that are available that can be very good compensation, high demand, but very good rewards and recognition. Number one would be in the area of sales and marketing. People need to, when I went to hotel school, what seems like a generation ago, they did not really focus on so much of what the value and understanding of how you communicate to your potential consumers, what you have to offer and how you're a little bit different. It doesn't mean being a used car salesperson and going out and trying to twist someone's arm. It means going through and explaining and showing and proving why you're good, why you're something special. And there's a tremendous need, and there's always a shortage of good people. The second area would be in culinary. You look at the proliferation of television cook shows and all of these and cookbooks. I mean, go to any bookstore, and it's just very exciting. And people find a sense of accomplishment, and you can get a short-term, almost immediate sense of accomplishment and self-satisfaction when you complete a culinary degree at again, lots of choices, because you now know something that you didn't know a year ago or 2 years ago. And you get to be creative, and you get to be something, you provide a service that people are interested in. And the third thing, it kind of, again, going back to looking at the somewhat of the global economic crisis that we've had, it's in finance and accounting. One in the hospitality industry, like every industry, needs to know where the money is, where it's gone, and how it's being effectively used. So those three areas, I would say, are tremendous growth areas.
That is great for people that are thinking about changing careers, especially in this time of difficulty. I also think that it's very important that you are stressing that schools just don't teach what we really need to know. You can't know what you need to know till you go out and do it. And then once you go out and do it, then you realize that the most important thing is relationship building and understanding people. Are there better career options working for large companies rather than for small organizations?
Well, in the hotel world, there are extremes of both ways. There are the very large organizations that have international locations, and part of that can be very exciting. Part of getting ahead in a big company can depend on what your specialty is. It can depend on politics to some degree, because every organization has some sort of internal politics. The advantages with working with big companies, if you choose one that you have a compatibility with, that is, you like one that is highly structured or you like one that is more entrepreneurial, and there are examples of each of those that are major companies, you can have a chance to blossom and to be groomed. You also, on the negative, or the disadvantage side of it, there's a challenge in recognizing that you're competing with many other top of the pile, top of the class candidates who are also looking to grow their careers. On the other hand, when you work for a smaller company, the first hotel I worked at was a small family-owned business. You can get a sense of being known, of being appreciated more. You're never going to typically grow beyond what the family level is, because the family is the one that owns it. Small companies in between the two can give you the opportunity to rise to you can be the big fish in the small pond, but recognize that the pond is only going to be as big as either you or that small company is going to grow. And so it's just a question of, to some degree, figuring out what you want. You can choose A and decide after 2 years or 3 years it's not the right choice. It's hard to make the choice a change of differences if you've done one for 20 years, because it's then hard to move to, especially from the smaller into the larger.
Right, I would imagine different paradigm. You have co-authored a book on sales in the hotel field and several hundred articles in magazines and online publications. What is your next writing project?
Well, I'm excited to continue. I'm going to be continuing to write my online and magazine articles, and this year I have offered, and I've had many people already accept. I will be co-authoring with a number of people, again, with different people in industry in different roles. That will give them additional exposure. It will give me additional exposure, and more importantly, it'll give me some additional ideas and different perspectives on topics. I like that.
Yeah, that's great. I know that for when I worked in the hospitality industry as a speaker, keynote, all these things, I was the person they brought in for image, because you definitely need to know how to have somebody at the front desk who's greeting the people, how to talk to the people, and there's so many different types of people. They have to understand the various personalities and styles. What is the difference in hotel companies and brands today, Dr. John?
Well, there are 8 large international holding companies that control between 75 and 80% of all the world's brands. And that's amazing, because each of these companies, with the exception of one that has everything that's the same name, the other 7, and one is in France, one is in the UK, and the rest of them are based in the United States, but they really are very international, and they're approximately maybe 60-40 as far as, and most of their growth is going to be outside of the United States now. Of these 8 companies, they each have 10 or 11 different brands or sub-brands. And the reason they have all the sub-brands is because they're all trying to get market penetration. There may not be a great deal of difference in the red brand versus what the blue brand has to offer, but in order for their franchise protection and everything else, they have to have something that is a little bit different. Consumers are starting to figure that out now, and so that's why you're moving on to, you know, whatever the next trend is going to be. There's a lot of Me Too within and repetition within hospitality, and that's why a certain number of brands literally every second or third year just disappear completely because nobody cares anymore.
That seems to be the truth. Dr. Hogan, what are some of the trends that you see as a professional in hotel development today?
Good question. We've gone through a lot of, in the West more, we've gone through a lot of full service, luxury, economy, rooms only, hybrids, and everything else over the last generation. And as we go through yet another financial crisis, and I've seen 4 in my career, the trend over the last 5 to 7 years has been not bucking what I just said about the 8 holding companies that control each 9 or 10 or 11 different brands each, because that they want to continue the vanilla flavor and or the Me Too's, and there's a certain market for that. What the real difference has been what they've called the boutique hotels, and by that I just mean the hotels that may be part of a brand, but more typically they tend to be a collection or independent. They could be the Historic Hotels of America or something that has a distinguishing difference than the hotel down the street with the yellow sign or the green sign. They are, boutique hotels tend to be something that's more back to the flavor of what the original hotels were, or the intent of them to have a really unique, one-of-a-kind experience, sort of what you get in a bed and breakfast.
Well, Dr. Hogan, which do you feel is more important to consumers and hotel managers today, high-tech or high-touch service? I would think that high-touch service would be the correct answer.
Well, this is always, that's another good question. That's something I'm always, in fact, I wrote just an article on that 10 days ago talking specifically about innovation, and I highlighted 3 companies that were so strong on social responsibility, on inclusion, on diversity, not as special initiatives or programs, but part of what they made them different. And the companies were Aramark, which is a large international food service company. It's a private company. It's Kimpton Hotels, which is one of those based out of California, started about 30 years ago, one of those boutique brands. And, of course, Marriott, which is always on the best of lists. They have dozens and dozens of awards. And each of those companies recognize that they must pay attention to both their employees, their staff, their associates, as their customers, their internal customers, and they must take care of their guests. We need high tech because otherwise hospitality is a very mature industry. Offering a free coffee in the morning or a happy hour in the evening does not make it different. Because a building is green now doesn't make it necessarily that unique to the experience. But the high touch, what people do one-on-one, that one individual associate at any department in the hotel to that individual guest, that's what makes the difference. So it's a balance, but high touch is where the winners will be.
Then I was proven wrong. However, I obviously know that high tech is important, or I wouldn't be able to be using the kind of technology I'm using.
I wasn't disagreeing with you. It's a balance, but it can't ignore either.
Of course. I just think the touchy-feeling people, probably like me, think about the high touch because you want to go into a place and you want to feel comfortable. You want to be in your comfort zone, and the high tech is something like behind the scenes. But of course, I know that is true that you need both. So I stand corrected. Services like TripAdvisor claim to serve consumers relating to hotels and hospitality companies. Do hoteliers find they really work?
Services like that can be either totally honest, or they can be sometimes a little manipulated, and I think the reality is there's a little bit of both. Today, you don't need necessarily a critic's the paid, fancy, formal critics to tell you if a movie is good or not. In fact, if you look at a movie, you'll see on Yahoo or MSN or any Google or any place else, they'll tell you what the critics say. They rated it A, B, C, D, and they'll say what the users looked at it, and you kind of make your decision. And they don't necessarily always agree. The good thing about TripAdvisor or those kind of services and the Internet is that you do get a chance to find out what the you and me who traveled there last week really said about it. And so you don't just have to have the formal reviewers going through and saying what their formal opinion might have been. The danger comes in if hotels try to ignore them, and if hoteliers take the right attitude and try to make sure that they identify good ways of communication on property so that if there is a problem, it gets corrected before the customer leaves so that they are inclined to say either something good or not talk about the negative experience. That's a very positive thing that has come. And again, that's part of both high-tech and high-touch. Good example of the two of them putting them together.
Yeah, that's exactly right, especially with the high-touch. When if people are unhappy, that's high-touch.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care about high-tech. They don't know about many people over a certain age, and there's going to be many, many more of us coming up in the near future, are interested in better service and people being kinder, because we've kind of turned into a society that's kind of just not caring, and that really is not something that I'm looking forward to. Would you tell our listeners how to get in touch with you via email, website, or any other means of communicating with you? You were so fascinating, I'm sure they'd like to know.
Well, my new website will be up, as I said, probably within a month, and I'd love to come back and talk to you about it.
Absolutely.
The easiest way is just John, John, J. Hogan at yahoo.com would be the easiest way to reach me.
Well, this has just been great, and it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Well, I appreciate the invitation, Dr. Joyce.
It's my pleasure.